When I first moved to Georgia, I was excited but a little nervous. I'd spent years dreaming of owning a home, and this move was supposed to be the start of something new, a place to finally settle down. But there was one thing I hadn't anticipated: the HOA. I'd never even heard of a homeowners association before. My realtor casually mentioned it, saying most neighborhoods here had them and that finding a house without one would be tough. At first, I wasn't sure what to think. The idea of paying extra fees and being told what I could or couldn't do with my own property sounded uncomfortable, but I loved the house, and the neighborhood seemed perfect, so I decided to give it a try. The first few weeks were all about unpacking and settling in. The neighborhood was beautiful tree-lined streets, kids riding their bikes, and neighbors who waved as they walked their dogs. The HOA sent me a welcome packet that included a list of rules and some upcoming community events. I skimmed through it, but didn't think much of it. Then I met Mr. Jacobson. He lived next door and had the most immaculate yard I'd ever seen. His grass was always the perfect height. His flower beds looked like they belonged in a magazine, and not a single leaf was ever out of place. He introduced himself the first weekend I was there, a smile on his face and a pair of gardening gloves in his hands. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said, glancing at my somewhat overgrown lawn. "If you need tips on yard care, I'm your guy." I laughed nervously and thanked him, but his words stayed with me. A couple of weeks later, I got a letter in the mail from the HOA. It wasn't a fine, just a friendly reminder about lawn maintenance. I'd been busy with work and hadn't had time to mow, and while the letter didn't mention me by name, it was clear who it was aimed at. Part of me was annoyed. Wasn't it my yard? But I also didn't want to start off on the wrong foot. That weekend, I spent hours mowing, trimming, and even planting a few flowers. When I was done, Mr. Jacobson stopped by. "Nice work," he said with a nod. Then he pointed to my flowers. "Those will need more sunlight. You might want to move them closer to the walkway." I wasn't sure whether to laugh or roll my eyes, but I thanked him anyway. Things were going smoothly until a massive storm rolled through that summer. The wind was relentless, and by the time it was over, my backyard fence was in pieces. My heart sank when I saw the damage. Repairs weren't in my budget, and I had no idea where to start. That's when the HOA surprised me. They sent out an email with resources for storm recovery, including a list of contractors and advice on filing insurance claims. They even organized a community cleanup day. I showed up, expecting it to be awkward, but it was actually amazing. Neighbors I'd never met were out with rakes, shovels, and chainsaws, helping clear debris. Mr. Jacobson was there too, offering tips on how to reinforce fences against future storms. Karen, one of the HOA board members, stopped by my house later that week. She asked how I was doing and even helped me find a contractor who gave me a fair deal on repairs. That experience changed the way I saw the HOA. They weren't just about rules and fees, they actually cared about the community. Over time, I started to feel more at home. The HOA organized events like block parties, holiday contests, and even outdoor movie nights. I'll never forget the annual charity bake sale. Mr. Jacobson brought his famous lemon bars, and I decided to try baking cookies. To my shock, my cookies were a hit. They sold out faster than his lemon bars, and he jokingly declared me his baking rival. There were still moments of frustration, like the time a neighbor got fined for leaving their trash cans out too long, or when people argued over whether the community pool should stay open later in the summer. But for every disagreement, there was also compromise. The HOA held meetings where everyone could share their opinions, and even though not everyone got their way, it felt good to have a voice. When I think back to those first days in the neighborhood, it's almost funny how skeptical I was about the HOA. Sure, they have their rules, and sometimes they're a bit too strict. But they've also created a community where people look out for each other. Mr. Jacobson still keeps an eye on my lawn, and I still tease him about my cookies being more popular than his lemon bars. We built a strange but wonderful friendship, and I've come to realize that the HOA isn't just about enforcing standards, it's about creating a place where people feel like they belong. Today, I'm proud to call this neighborhood my home. It's not perfect, but it's ours, and for that, I'm grateful.